Like to hear about that I might know something about or could share with you some Prabhupada stories. Yes? Chaitanya Charitamrita printing Lila. Okay. Anyone else have any other topics they also want? Yes?
Detailed explanation of Ado Shraddha to Prema.
I'm sorry, what is the question?
Detailed description of from Ado Shraddha to Sadhu Sang and Prema. Like that.
See, there are various stages of progressive devotional service. So he wants to hear about Ado Shraddha, Sadhu Sang.
Yeah, I want to hear about that also. I'll try to have some future realizations, and then I'll come back and tell you about it. Hare Krishna. Any other Prabhupada stories anyone would like to hear about? Yes?
How Prabhupada empowered devotees, like, because in our case, many times we feel that whether I am able to do it. So how Prabhupada was so expert.
How devotees became empowered by Srila Prabhupada. Okay. In the spiritual world, well, let me say this. Here we are learning how God is great, how God is opulent, how God is powerful, how He has unlimited, infinite potencies, infinite energies. And we are so tiny in comparison. So this is our conception as we first try to become free from the control of the material energy. We understand that material energy is under Krishna's control. We understand, we study how great Krishna is, and we aspire to be pure enough to be His servant, that He will give us protection and so on. So that is our conception from this material plane looking up. And that's our path of bhakti. But, and you wanted to hear, what about beyond that? In the highest spiritual plane, the infinitely powerful, infinitely beautiful, infinitely strong, infinitely opulent, supreme being is under the control of His devotees' love. The infinite agrees or is attracted enough by that pure devotion to come under that control of the finite. It seems inconceivable that something that is so infinite could ever want to be under the control of something so tiny as a jiva or a living entity. But in that spiritual plane, Krishna enjoys being under the control of His devotees. And so you ask, now how does Prabhupada empower devotees? The answer is simply by his desire for pleasing Krishna, having devotees do something that will be so pleasing to Krishna, but because that desire, that wish, that is coming from a pure devotee, pure soul, pure lover of God, Krishna has to empower those devotees just to please his pure servant Prabhupada. This is the reciprocation between the unlimited and the pure lover of God. Each one wants to be under the control of the other. It is a type of love that we cannot imagine. But anyway, Krishna sees what Prabhupada's desires are, so he will make arrangements for those desires to be satisfied. By Krishna's grace, Prabhupada used to tell us everything has happened. And souls took birth, I'm sure of this, all over the world. Just as when Krishna is preparing to descend into the world, the message is given, a transcendental transmission is sent from the Supreme Personality of Godhead to Lord Brahma. And then Lord Brahma, having received that transmission, he conveys it to the Devas. God is about to appear. Now, we all have to assist him. So we will now expand ourselves and take birth in this place and in that place. The Devas can appear in more places than one at a time. So in that way, in preparation for appearance of the incarnation of Krishna, so many celestial beings take birth in preparation, ready, so that when Krishna descends, they are to be part of his Lila. So I am convinced the same thing happened when Prabhupada was preparing to descend and come to the Western world, cross the ocean, and bring Krishna consciousness to the world. I'm convinced that the same thing happened. Krishna can see everything in the past, everything in the present, and everything that is going to be in the future. He knew when Prabhupada was going to cross the ocean. He knew, because he's Krishna. He arranged for souls to take birth in cities all over the world. Just like the Devas come when Krishna is appearing, so devotees on earth were taking their birth in places all over the world by the arrangement of Krishna in preparation for Prabhupada's appearance in the Western world. I'm sure of this. Because when I hear from devotees how they came in contact with Prabhupada, how they first became devotees, they didn't know anything about Krishna consciousness. If they took birth in a country, in a Malecha country, in a Yavana country, in a country, if it had any religion, it was Judaic religion, Christian religion, Muslim religion. They had no idea what Vedic knowledge is, what God really looks like, anything. So they were just asleep. And you talk to these devotees how when Prabhupada came and started chanting and they started reading his books, they suddenly gave up their whole life. They left their parents. Sometimes they left their husbands. Sometimes they left their wives. They just gave up everything. How is that possible? They were sent They took their birth, they were waiting, and then the divine spark of Prabhupada's chanting through his kirtan and through his books, and it just awakened them. So the first empowerment of devotees, I believe, happened in that way. That Krishna had sent souls, and at the right time, Krishna in their heart just made them awaken out of their material consciousness and become lovers of Prabhupada. Lovers of Prabhupada because Prabhupada was such a great lover of Krishna. That's how it happened. So empowerment, you ask, how did Prabhupada empower? I believe that's how. By his really infinite love for Krishna. Infinite love. Uninterrupted. Unmotivated. Continuous. A type of love that doesn't exist in the material realm. No one, even a mother loving the child cannot love as much their child as Prabhupada loved Krishna. There'll always be a time where the mother starts, at least let me think about myself for a day or for an hour. It's not continuous that all I do my whole life is the child and my love for the child. Husband to the wife, wife for the husband. That love is not burning 24/7 endlessly. Like maybe in the beginning when the husband and wife first start dating and meeting each other, there's a great intensity of passion. And after a few years, that's not the same. And everyone knows that. So material love is always interrupted because the person who is the object of your love is just not divine, is not supreme. And what the soul needs to be satisfied is to be in love with God, not to be in love with anything less. So as much as we try to find love, it will never be uninterrupted. It will never be pure. It will never be unmotivated. It will never be ever fresh. Like every moment is like the first time you ever saw the person you love for your whole life. No, that you cannot experience that by trying to love something in the material world. It just doesn't work. But such a love, which is the true need of every soul, is love. The nature of every soul is to be in love and to give love and to be loved back. That's our nature. But we cannot satisfy that nature by directing our emotion towards anything less than God himself or God's perfect representative. It just doesn't work. The soul will never be satisfied. And even if you think you have the perfect Romeo and Juliet love, then death will come, and in the next life you won't even remember that lady's name. And you'll have no idea where she is, because you'll be God knows where, in God knows what kind of body. So the only way the soul can be satisfied with ever expanding love. Imagine a feeling of pleasure and the next moment it increased. But the very next moment it increased again. And the next moment it keeps increasing. This is the nature of the spiritual energy. It is always expanding. So whatever capacity you think you have for love and emotion, we haven't even begun to explore the depths of what is in our own soul, what we are capable of, what we can experience. Until that love is focused on the supreme beauty, the supreme object, the supreme source of everything, that type of love will not awaken. And when you are focused and that love awakens, it is so intoxicating that even God himself comes under the spell of it. So this is the relationship that the souls in the spiritual world have with God. This is the relationship that Prabhupada has with Krishna. His love for Krishna is so unlimited that even Krishna becomes intoxicated by it. Krishna becomes captivated by Prabhupada's love. Krishna comes under the control of his devotee's love. So when his devotee wants something, naturally, Krishna, who's under the captivating spell of love, will arrange for it to happen. And that's how devotees become empowered. It's this divine Lila between the pure devotee and Krishna. And we just become the recipients, the beneficiaries. You could even say, agyata sukriti, undeserved mercy. The sun is shining. You don't have to do anything to deserve feeling the rays of sunlight. You don't have to do anything to be worthy. It just is shining on everyone. That's what happens between Krishna and his pure devotee, that loving affair. You just happen to be in the vicinity. It's just like the sun shining on you. And now, all of a sudden, you become effulgent. All of a sudden, you get a taste of it, and you become surcharged by this potency that's not material. The fact that it's not material means it never stops. It never ceases. It's indestructible. It's immeasurable. It's ever increasing and ever expanding. And once that potency enters into those in the vicinity, there are very funny verses in the writings of Rupa Goswami. Even Radharani has a very funny saying that if you want to be successful in your material life, if you want to be very attached to family and wealth and house and nation and material objects, don't go near the pure devotee and don't go near Krishna, because if you do, it'll ruin your whole life. Your goal of being a great materialist will be completely spoiled once you become infected with bhakti. Once you are the recipient by just being in the vicinity of a pure devotee, that's your material life is finished. So, in this way, this ever effulgent energy of love that was going back and forth between Prabhupada and Krishna just spread to anyone who was around them. And that's how devotees became empowered. And what does it mean to be empowered? What does that actually mean? So now, to your interest in the story of the production of Prabhupada's books, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that's a pretty good example of what it means to be empowered, just if you're in the vicinity of this energy. if you're in the vicinity of Prabhupada and Krishna's love affair, how does that empower you? So I will tell that story as best I can. Prabhupada told us that he was sent into this world to write these books, to produce in book form the incarnation of God in literary form in a way that the world would receive God through books. It was his divine mission when he was sent down here to give the whole world this Vedic knowledge about who is God. Where is God's abode? What is it like if you are there in the kingdom of God? What do souls who are there do with God? What are their feelings? What are their experiences? What are God's thoughts? What is his feelings, his emotion? Imagine books that describe the emotions of God, the form of God, the unlimited beauty of God, the intoxicating effect of being in God's presence. Prabhupada came down into this world to produce these books. That's his mission. And in order to accomplish this mission, as we all know, he had to be able to concentrate in a very undisturbed way on hearing Krishna inside his heart speaking the words, how the words that should be in these books. And the only way Prabhupada could do that was to wait until everyone around him was asleep. Because from the early morning until the time everyone was asleep, everyone was bothering him. I don't mean bothering in a bad way, but talking to him, doing things with him, preaching with him, arranging for people to come and hear him, arranging for programs, pandal, or doing so many things, day and night, bringing professors to Prabhupada, bringing all kinds of people to Prabhupada. And of course, devotees, as the expansion of devotee Krishna Bhakti took place, and devotees started manifesting all over the world. Now they had so many questions. And Prabhupada was their teacher, their father. So they were writing letters to him. 20, 30 a day. Every day of every month of every year. A different 20 or 30 letters came every single day. And Prabhupada, like a loving father, if the child is asking a question, does he ignore it? No. He took the time to read the letters and write back to every single devotee that ever wrote to him, to every person that ever wrote to him. That was just one part of his day. It took hours, but it was just one part of his day. His day was filled with training his devotees, teaching them, breaking up their fights, because after all, their neophyte devotees will have disagreements, and Prabhupada had to organize and train them how to deal with all those disagreeable things to continue advancing in their service. Prabhupada had to standardize practices of bhakti. It was a very big deal for Prabhupada to have the same program and process in every temple around the world. So just like I come here from America, in my temple, we greet the deities at 4:30 in the morning, and we sing these certain prayers. And at this temple, thousands of miles away, the exact same thing. 4:30 in the morning, the door open, we greet the deities, we sing the exact same prayers. And then the sacred devotee in the plant form of Bhakti Devi herself, Tulsi Maharani, appears. And we chant and pray for her to give us not just protection, but to draw us into Krishna Prema. And she does. And then after that, we're all chanting on our beads, the Hare Krishna mantra, the same program. Then it's time to greet the deities with the same Govindam prayers from Brahma Samhita. This was not easy for Prabhupada to train devotees who spoke many different languages in different cities and countries around the world to all, at the exact same time, do the exact same thing. This was a big effort. When Prabhupada first wrote Nectar of Devotion and first introduced this morning program, evening program, Bhagavatam class, chanting Sanskrit slokas, he would have devotees from these different temples fly in, spend 2 weeks with them. He was training them. Here's how you cook for Krishna. Here's how you decorate deities. Here's how you dress them. No, that's not allowed. You have to do it this way. All the rules of Archana Vigraha. So cooking for Krishna, dressing Krishna, chanting shlokas, chanting japa. Every single thing, Prabhupada had them fly in, and for 2 weeks at a time, he would train them or have them trained. Then he would have them go back to the temples. And gradually, in this way, the whole worldwide movement became organized with the exact same morning and evening programs and the exact same services during the daytime. So anyway, this took a lot of time, a lot of effort. Plus, people who are hearing about Prabhupada, they wanted to meet him. He always stopped to meet people, let them come up to his room, and he would meet with them, go to his garden, and they would talk together. Famous professors from all over the world, famous priests, and just people in general, they wanted to meet Prabhupada. He always took the time. And I mentioned the 20 to 30 letters a day, all of these things. The only way he could write these books, which was the actual reason he came to this world, is to wait till everyone was asleep and not disturbing him with all these other things. And naturally, as this movement grew, organizing a growing worldwide movement and making sure it remained stable and supported and financed and always aiming at new projects to challenge and inspire devotees to work towards. All of this was Prabhupada's daytime and evening activity. And then when everyone was asleep, he gave up his own sleep for 10, 12 years in a row. Not just for a month or 2 months, as this story is about to be told. For 12 years, Prabhupada didn't sleep. He gave up sleeping out of his love for us, to give us this knowledge, to give us these books. That's what he had to sacrifice. And his love for us was so great. His desire to save souls was so intense that he was willing to do what no one can do. Just give up sleep for 12 years in a row, every day, every night. Because Prabhupada was so regular that when he awoke, when he ate, when he met with people, when he answered letters, when he bathed, and when he went into seclusion in the midst of all of this organization and business of running a worldwide movement. You know, most authors, they will tell you to really write a good book, they have to spend a lot of time researching and interviewing and talking to specialists in different fields. And then they have to go where they're totally no other business, undisturbed. And then maybe they can write one book. And this is true for almost every author in the world except for Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada did not run to some secluded place. He remained in his centers with his devotees around him, with all the business affairs of a growing worldwide movement. And he just waited for everyone to be asleep. And he compartmentalized all of that business. And when he was alone, finally alone, he's never alone. Now this was his special time with Krishna. This was his deepest time in love with Krishna, to hear Krishna, to have exchanges in the inner world of the soul of a pure devotee. There are exchanges between that soul and Krishna. And in this way, now here's the point of it. Why did Prabhupada have to concentrate so deeply? Why did every word have to be chosen so intensely that he had to hear Krishna and not be disturbed by anything? Because in this world, it's babbled. There's a million languages. There's so many cultures. There's so many nationalities. There's so many differences between people all around the world. And he has to write a book that is universal. That in the most intense, fanatical countries of the Middle East and the most secular, humanistic countries of Northern Europe and the most densely atheistic countries and behind an iron curtain, and he had to write one book for everyone, all these different types of people. It had to be able to reach their soul. The same book. That's why he had to choose every single word with Krishna. And those books had this effect. That's why there's thousands and tens of thousands and 100,000 devotees in Russia today. The same book that made so many thousands of devotees in America is making devotees in China. Is making devotees all over the world. But that's just the beginning of Prabhupada's compassion for saving souls. He's not just looking at all the differences and different societies and cultures that exist now. He was thinking, okay, the prophecy is that Lord Chaitanya will have a golden age in this Kali Yuga. It'll almost be like the Satya Yuga appears in the Kali Yuga. Complete restoration of Vedic culture. Complete restoration of leaders of the world that are completely God conscious, and the people of the world demanding such a country, such a leader. In order for that to happen, Prabhupada had to choose words that would reach into the souls of people 100 years from now, 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now. And when this golden age is finally fully established, it has to be maintained 5,000 years from now, these words in Prabhupada's books have to still have great meaning for everyone that in 5,000 years that they have now. Who can write a book like that? Who could even think on that scale? Whose love could be that great that they want to love every soul that exists in human form now and for the next 10,000 years? Who could even think of such a thing? The scale of it, the dimension of love that Prabhupada has is beyond any human ability to measure. So publishing these books in his lifetime was a very important thing. So now we come to this story. He was writing the Srimad Bhagavatam. He came to the Western world with 3 volumes, first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And after he established this movement, he wrote the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And by 1968, 69, he was already starting the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And out of his love and his immense compassion, he heard what no one can hear. He heard the crying of souls that are asleep. You know, when someone is asleep, they're not talking. He heard their anxiety, their crying while they were asleep. What is this world? What is this? Why am I here? Where is God? Who is God? He heard this desperate cry of souls all over the world. So he stopped writing the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he started compiling from the whole 10th canto, which is like 20 volumes. He condensed it into 2 books called Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And by 1970, he had finished that condensing of that book. And also, that same year, he finished Bhagavad Gita as it is, 1,000 pages of Krishna's words and purports. And Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion from Rupa Goswami. All of this was ready by 1970. And then he went back to the Srimad Bhagavatam. He finished the 3rd canto in the rest of 1970, 71. Then 1972, he finished the 4th canto. Now this society that he had created had no money. They were going out in robes, chanting. It was very foreign and exotic, and selling little packages of incense for 25 cents, sometimes $1. And that was just paying for the temples and the deity worship. And meanwhile, these books are being translated and purport, they're written, but there's no money to make them. Anyway, now we come to I finished 72, so 4th canto, 73. Now he says, let me stop again. I must tell them about the highest emotions that Krishna feels for Radha. I must give the most important, unique literature in the whole universe. That's part of my mission. I must give that to the world. And he begins to write towards the end of 1973 and all through 1974, 17 volumes of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And now we go into 1975. He's writing a book a month while we're sleeping. And he starts writing the most complicated part of the whole Bhagavad Purana, the cosmology of the universe, in the 5th canto, in 1975. And meanwhile, his movement, his organized movement, his ISKCON Press, his Bhaktivedanta Book Trust is finally publishing what he wrote in 72. Finally, they're finishing the third canto, and in 1974, they're coming out with the 3 or 4 volumes of the fourth canto. Meanwhile, there's another 17 or 18 or 19 books waiting. So Prabhupada had to deal with this situation, that it was taking his movement 4 months for each book to come out. The Sanskrit, the Devanagari, the editing, and there were no computers in this day. This was hand composition, hand typesetting, layout, pastings, photograph, black and white, color, art, paintings. He wanted his books to sell, so he insisted that they have beautiful, sublimely beautiful, realistic artwork. Anyway, the whole process, an index in each book. Indexing is a painstaking process. To go through a whole book and index every word. To make an index takes a month. Anyway, 4 months for one book to come out. So now it's the beginning of 1975, and he's 17 books ahead of us. And to make it a little more complicated, the BBT trustee that was in charge of producing the books took a leave of absence for personal reasons. And now ISKCON Press was left just with the devotees, but without their leader. So the production, the publishing was being done in Los Angeles. The printing, the actual press work, production of the book was being done in New York, and the publishing and selling and warehousing, that was done in LA. So Prabhupada called us up, spoke to us actually, didn't call us. He didn't like using the phone. Prabhupada spoke to us and said, well, now that our leader in New York is gone, can you from LA manage everything you're doing and expand and take on everything that he was doing? Can you do that? And I said no. Because I can't be in 2 places at the same time. If you want to bring everything to one place, then maybe we can expand and give up sleep like you have done. Maybe it'll be possible. So he thought about it and said, that's a good idea. Let's fly to New York together and ask the 40 devotees who work at ISKCON Press, doing the layout and composition and editing and transcribing and Sanskrit work and artwork and all photographic work. Let's ask them if they think it's a good idea. So the spiritual master of the world is flying to ask them if they would agree to do something that he wants. Well, it took about a microsecond, in a nanosecond, for them to agree. As soon as they saw this is what Prabhupada wants, okay, so what do we have to do? We have to pick up our homes. Some of us had families, children, and we're just going to move all the way to California where we've never been in our life. All right. That's what you do when you're a disciple and you see the desire of your guru and you want, and You're in so much love with your guru, you want to displease him. So, after flying to New York and discussing it with depressed devotees, Prabhupada said, now let's ask the GBC at the Mayapur festival if they think this is a good idea. So Prabhupada has an idea, and he's going to ask his leaders, do you think this is okay? And they're going to take about a nanosecond to say, of course, Prabhupada, whatever you want. But he waited until the March-April festival of 1975 and presented it to the GBC, and they agreed. At that time, there was only one real BBT. It was the American BBT. The India BBT was very tiny. There was some BBT activities in different languages in Europe, but it was mainly the American BBT that was dealing with Prabhupada's original books. So, after that was decided, Prabhupada, at the end of the festival, went to New Zealand and Australia and then Hawaii. And that took April and May, 2 months and a half, middle of June. And in the meantime, we went back to LA and we started thinking, okay, we have to bring like 40 or 50 devotees to the West Coast. We have to buy all new equipment. We need buildings. We need to break down walls. We need to rebuild, like do build outs for these unique facilities, dark room for black and white photography, dark room for color photography, art studios with easels for artists that have to have natural light coming in a certain direction. So many things we had to think about, and we had to get buildings. Anyway, somehow or other, to skip a little bit, in the 2 months from the time we got back from India, we had the buildings. We rebuilt all the interior rooms in the 2 buildings we had. We rebuilt all the interior rooms and walls, changed the plumbing, changed the windows, put in skylights for the art. We did all this stuff, bought all this equipment from wherever it was being sold, had it installed, and got every one of those devotees to go on an airplane, come out. Now, wait a minute. It's not just the 2 buildings. Where are they going to live? We need another building. We got to have a building for all these 50 devotees and their families to live. Somehow or other, all of this happened in LA in about 2 or 3 months. Now, when I think about it, if you ask me, could I do that again? The answer is no. To buy a building takes a lot of time. To set up housing for 50 people takes a lot of time. To build these kind of specialized offices in the pre-computer age of production of books, this took a lot of time. How this whole thing came together in 2 or 3 months is kind of like what you were asking about, empowered. I don't know how it happened. I just know I helped make it happen. I had something to do with it. What happened is this. The LA temple had about 200-300 devotees living in it. When we told the community of what Prabhupada's desire was, every devotee got infected with that mood of, we have to make this happen, we have to do this. It was like a marathon. We went out and collected, and we bought a building. We rented another building. We paid for everything. The whole community just dropped everything in their lives to make this happen. So that by the end of May, all of ISKCON Press had been relocated to Los Angeles. So now it's June, and we are ready to start on the 17 books that we are behind. And we had been planning, how are we going to change this from one book every 4 months? What can we do? So right now, we had one editor, Jayadvaita. We found Hayagriva, who was a much faster editor. We convinced him to come to LA. We convinced a few other devotees from around the world, you have to come to LA to help us. And we were planning and planning. We can have 2 lines of editing, 2 lines of production, like assembly line. We'll be able to bring the whole process down to each assembly line is making a book in 2 months instead of in 4 months. But if we have 2 assembly lines, each a book every 2 months, that averages to 1 book a month. But each line, each production assembly line was going to cut the time in half, from 4 months to 2 months, times 2 assembly lines. We were so proud of this plan. Now, Prabhupada is in Hawaii, and I am starting to get phone calls from his secretary. Prabhupada is very angry with you. What did I do? I have no idea what. You are 17 books behind. He just put me in charge of the press for the first time a few months ago. I just finished moving them. I've never produced a book yet. This is my first time at this. You have to organize the art. I don't know anything about art. I don't have a background in art history. I'm not an art major. He's very mad at you. And he's coming to LA, and he's got me calling all the senior leaders of around the world to fly in and meet him in LA when he confronts you. So you may not know these names, but Brahmananda was coming to LA. Kirtanananda was coming to LA. Tamal Krishna was coming to LA. Vishnu Jan was coming to LA. Rupanuga was coming to LA. Satsvarupa was coming to LA. On and on. These senior leaders were getting phone calls. You have to meet Prabhupada in LA. So they did. And it was around the 20th of June, something like that. Prabhupada arrives. There's this, 300 devotees at the airport greeting him. All the non-devotees are just amazed because the devotees are dancing and leaping in an airport and chanting with musical instruments, and everyone's straining to see what's causing this. Who's the celebrity? This is like more than Beatlemania. What's going on? And so Prabhupada comes into the temple and he gives this arrival address, which is probably the most famous arrival address he ever gave, where he tells the story of his guru telling him to sell the marble temples and get money and print books. He tells this intimate story of his instructions that he got from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that became his entire soul, his mission. He lived for it, never got diverted from it. And he says, oh, my guru was so fond of this. He said, I took it from his mouth. I took it from his lips. This nectarine instruction to sell temples if you have to, but get money and print and distribute books all around the world. And then he said, this is his arrival address. So I am begging you Now, the Prabhupada, the emissary from the spiritual world, is talking to us like I'm begging you. Where is book? Where is book? Where is book? And I'm just like thinking, how can I disappear into like some like tiny particle and vanish? And then he starts talking about how he is beating us to distribute books in every language throughout the whole world. And he's laying out this whole plan for how through this distribution of books, the world is going to change. The atmosphere, the planet's going to change. Everything's going to change. Where is it happening? You have to make it happen. That was his arrival address. You could look it up. June 1975, LA, New Dorka, arrival address on the tapes of the, what do they call it? The archives. You hear this, it's the best arrival address ever. So now, later that day, we take Prabhupada on a tour of the new BBT offices. We want to show him everything we've done so far to prepare. Look at these new machines. This is the state of the art in typesetting. This is the state of the art in photography and in dark rooms and this and that. And we had this, I don't know what you call it, it was like a felt board, like from this wall to that, what do you call it? Little box out section, that big. And each line was a different line of production of books. And we had these little pegs, and the columns were for every one of the 17 books. And we were going to track every moment, the stage of production that each of these books was in. Of course, it hadn't started yet, but we had it all set up, very organized. So Prabhupada had his tour of the new ISKCON Press at BBT in LA. Then that finished that day, and now the next morning, after Mangal Artik, whatever temple Prabhupada was at, he would go for a morning walk between the end of Mangal Artik and the time for greeting the deities. In LA, 90% of his morning walks are on the beach, an ocean beach called Venice Beach. 10% were at a park overlooking the beach called, it was some Santa Monica park. So this morning, the morning walk is on Venice Beach. And the morning walk is ecstatic. We're talking about all kinds of things that Prabhupada wants to do to spread this movement around the world, and how the world's going to change, and how we have to defeat Darwinism, and all these different topics. They were so ecstatic on this morning walk. And it was almost time to go back to the temple. And all these people are on the walk with their sannyas dandas, Tamal and Vishnu Jan and Brahmananda and Kirtananda and Satsarup, and they're all there. And then as Prabhupada is walking, so, he says, how long will it take to produce these 17 books? So I was standing behind the sannyasis naturally, so I came up to talk right next to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, we have a really good plan. We are currently doing one book every 4 months, as you know. We have a whole production line that can cut that in half. We can do one book in 2 months. But then we have a duplicate production line. So now we can do 2 books in 2 months, which is equal to 1 book a month. We've gone from 1 book in every 4 months to 1 book a month. And I thought whatever I thought. And Prabhupada said, so more than 1 year, that was what his comment was. 17 books, 1 book a month. So more than 1 year. I can't wait. You could see it in his emotion, in his heart. The world can't wait. The souls of the world can't wait. The devotees in this Hare Krishna movement can't wait another year before they can read about Lord Chaitanya and the emotions that led him to come and descend into this world, the true reason for his appearance. He said, no, I'm not interested in 1 book every 2 months. I want all 17 books in 2 months. So he kept walking, and the production manager, a devotee named Radha Balava, was on this walk with me. We're looking at each other. We didn't hear that right, did we? That's not, he couldn't have meant that. So I went back up to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, we really can do a book a month. He said, no, I want all 17 books in 2 months. I said, Prabhupada, there's typesetting. The index alone takes a month. It takes the artists 1 month to do a painting, 2 months to do a painting. I have to have 7 paintings in each book. I went through all the different departments that are involved in making a book. I said, I can't do 17 books in 2 months. And he just stopped walking. He planted his cane in the sand. He turned and very gravely, looking at me, not me, the body, but looking at me, the soul in this heart of this body, and with the most penetrating look, and with the most divine spiritual words, he said, I want 17 books in 2 months. I had already explained that it's not possible. And I felt, what, Prabhupada not hear me? That was a mundane, offensive thought, which I was capable of. So I just blurted it out. Prabhupada, that's impossible. It's just impossible. You can't defy the laws of physics. It's impossible. You can't take something that it takes this long to do and make it happen it's just not, it's impossible. And with the greatest love and compassion and ferocity and intensity of a divine being, he looked into my soul, way past my brain and intelligence. He took right into my soul. And he said, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. And he kept looking at me after he said that. And it was the longest pause in the history of pauses. And when he was certain that I was going beyond the intellectual plane, I was really understanding this is a spiritual command. When he was sure he injected that order, that didn't mean I was agreeing yet, then he turned slowly and started walking again. Now, while he was pausing and looking at me, standing behind him in this great semicircle were the senior-most leaders of the Hare Krishna movement in the world. Tamal, Vishnu Jana, Satsarup, Brahmananda. These are very intimidating personalities. Kirtananda, Rupanuga, on and on. There must have been about 12 GBC and sannyasis there. And as Prabhupada is telling, they're all looking at me. They're all devotees before I was. They're all senior in every way. And I could just look up for a second from Prabhupada was holding my, I just looked up for a second to look at them. And I immediately saw two things in their face. The first thing was, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? This is the greatest challenge any of us have ever, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And this is all in a flash. And the second thing I saw in their face, I am so glad this is not me. They're standing behind Prabhupada, looking at me like that. So that was very encouraging. No support from all the leaders. Because Prabhupada gave a command. The leaders are just going to, yes, do it. You have to do it. So I was just stunned. And Radhaballabha was just stunned. We could not move physically. We were like stunned. We couldn't move. It was an emotion of being stunned. Frozen. They're walking and we're frozen. Like we can't even believe what just happened. And Radhaballabha's looking at me. Is this even possible that this happened? Could this even be possible that this could be done? And I'm not even hearing him. It was like sound, like babble to me. It was like, I'm just thinking about impossible. We're dealing with God. We're dealing with the emissary of God from the spiritual world. We're dealing with the infinite, unlimitedly powerful God. And I'm such an insect. I say to God and his representative, something is impossible? To God? What kind of an idiot says to God something's impossible? That was what was hitting me. That suddenly I just started thinking, look at the planets. Look at the sun. Look at the arrangement of the whole universe. If these planets change in their orbit a little bit, they'll freeze or burn. They are so heavy, incalculably heavy, and they're floating perfectly in arrangement that is inconceivably perfect. And I'm telling the person who speaks for God that something's impossible? When this is going on in the whole universe? It just hit me. It's not, there's no such thing as impossible. I got it. There's nothing impossible for Krishna. And it says in the Bhagavatam and in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that within the order of the spiritual master, the bona fide spiritual master, comes that order carries the potency to carry out the order. Now, I hadn't read that yet because I hadn't read the Chaitanya Charitamrita yet. No one had read the Chaitanya Charitamrita yet. But it's stated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that in the divine order of a pure devotee guru, when he gives an order, he's also giving you the empowered ability to do it. The power is in that order. It's a spiritual order. It's a spiritual potency. And there is nothing impossible for the spiritual energies of God. Nothing. They are greater than all the material energies which are doing impossible things. So, I just had that glimpse, that realization that, okay, this is somehow possible. I am going to turn off my common sense. I'm going to turn off my intelligence. I'm going to turn off my brain. I'm going to turn off every single thing that I think I know and accept that this is possible. In my mind, it defies the laws of physics, but it's possible. I'm just going to focus on that and see what happens. So what happened next has nothing to do with me, only has to do with Prabhupada. Only. I was a doubting insect that said something totally stupid to a pure devotee who came from the spiritual world. So I was a nothing. But what happened next was from outside coming into my subjective mind and intelligence and subjective vision started coming some ideas how this is going to be done. This did not originate from me. This was planted inside me by my accepting, setting aside the material calculation, just accepting the order. My brain just started filling up with ideas I never had before, thoughts I never could have imagined, ideas of how to do something that made no sense. It just became so clear. I was filling up with this. And I was like pulling Radha Ballabha aside, and I was speed talking down. We could do this, we could do that. Where's this coming from? We could do this, we could do that. Literally, that's what was happening. Just an infusion, a transmission. From where? From Krishna's grace, from Krishna's energies, from Krishna's servants. It's just a transmission. And I was so convincing that Radha Ballabha became convinced. And I said, let's run up to Prabhupada and tell him we can do it. And we ran up to Srila Prabhupada. And now everyone's looking, and we finally came back up and said, Prabhupada, I think we can do this, but I have 3 requests. Like conditions. You can't make conditions on the pure devotee, but I asked for certain things. I asked him, you have to stay in LA for 1 month. Out of this 2 months that you're giving us, we need you here for the first month because we're going to have a lot of questions. We haven't even started reading these 17 books. We have no idea what the paintings are going to be. But we're going to need to ask you every kind of question imaginable about what this looks like, what that looks like, what this place looks like, how to paint something. And only you can answer those questions, so we need you here. Our editors, they're going to have 1,000,000 questions because none of them speak Bengali. And Chaitanya Charitamrita is in the text is Bengali. We don't even know how to write it. They have to learn. After 5-6 years of mastering and learning Sanskrit, they've got to turn themselves into Bengali experts in a day. It's not that easy. We're going to need to visit you every day with their questions. And so that was my first request. Please stay here a month. He said, all right. He only stayed 3 weeks, but it was enough. My second request was, Prabhupada, I don't have enough men to do what I'm planning. I want your permission, with your blessing, and to be able to quote you as your blessing to write a letter to 120 temples, because by then we had 120 temples, and ask for certain devotees who have certain abilities. And I listed them: editing, typing, all kinds of artists, photographers. I need more manpower. And I just want to borrow them for 2 months from temples around the world, but they're not going to give them up unless I can say it's okay with you. And he said, yes, you can do that. And I sent out a letter, and we got about 30 devotees to come over. So the 2 assembly lines kind of became like 4 assembly lines, each one working about 14 hours, 12 hours. Then when they would pass out, the next one came. And then the third request, he didn't like it. It was the one he liked. Well, I said, Prabhupada, in terms of filling the book with artists, at least with Chaitanya Charitamrita, I knew this much, that this is history that happened 500 years ago in India. I would like some of the color plates to be photographs of these places where Lord Chaitanya walked and traveled and had Lilas. And the rest will be paintings. He said, all right, I will allow. It's the first time he ever allowed photographs in his books. And I said, the last question, Prabhupada, is, I know you're not going to stay for the full 2 months. Our artists are going to have questions. We cannot write a letter to you that takes 2 weeks to get to you. You give the answers, it takes 2 weeks to get back. When we have questions, I need to get on the phone and call your secretary. He has to drop everything, go and see you, and beg you to drop everything, and give him the answers to those questions, and then run back to the phone and call me with the answers. This has to happen all within like 1 or 2 hours. And Prabhupada hated that phone business, but he agreed, all right, this one time you can call me wherever I am in the world to get your answers. And with that, we ran back to ISKCON Press. We had the morning class, of course, but right after the morning class, we met with all these devotees that had just come from New York, and we started telling them, they thought, what, are you crazy? 17, they had the same reaction. And we were already so empowered and convinced that it was like an energy that spread, an enthusiasm, a consciousness that, we just convinced everybody you could do it. And then they convinced themselves, and they convinced others, and soon everyone who worked at ISKCON Press was convinced. Then I had to go to the temple community of 300 devotees. And I had to sit with the leaders and tell them, listen, for the next 2 months, and this is going to sound a little weird, I need you to do our laundry. I need you to cook for us and feed us. I need you to buy our toothpaste. We can't leave the press for 2 months. We're not going to be sleeping. We're barely going to be bathing. I need this whole community of LA to support this marathon. And they just got so excited. And the temple president is a devotee named Tulsi Das. And Jayatirtha was the GBC. They got so excited. Yes, we'll do. This is like you've been asked to do something that is totally impossible. We get it. We'll help. We'll help. In this way, just by being in the vicinity of the order of the pure devotee, everyone became empowered. Every single devotee went on Prabhupada time. which meant you only needed 1 or 2 hours sleep. Every devotee for that marathon got 1 or 2 hours sleep. That was it. And sometimes the emotions were so intense that I'm sure that some of the devotees, especially the artists, they really wanted to kill me. I'm sure of it. But before I get to that, I have to tell you that the next day, one of our Sankirtan parties was chanting on the ocean walk between Santa Monica and Venice Beach, and some gentleman from either Colombia or Venezuela just was barefoot walking around, and he seemed very interested. He came back to the temple with them, and one of the devotees came up to me and said, "We brought somebody back from the beach. He says he's an artist." I get, "Oh yeah, right. So, okay, I'll meet him." And it turns out that if you ever saw these TV shows where an artist could do an entire painting in 1 hour, there's certain artists that can just paint landscapes and figures and do it in such an amazingly fast way. So he was one of those. Walking barefoot on the beach. It's like he came out of the ocean. I don't know where he came from. Krishna just made him appear. Krishna literally made him appear. His expertise was landscape, forest, trees, flowers, plants, anything landscape. This devotee, his name was Hector, Bhakta Hector, painted the landscaping of every single painting in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Every single one of them. The devotees would do the compositions, they would plan it all out, and when it was time to fill in the landscaping, we just moved it over to Hector, and he just, and then it went back to the artist. True story. So these artists, so anyway, we didn't even know what to paint. So I said to Radha, okay, I have to lock myself in a room, give me all 17 volumes, I have to read them. And I'll pick which things are going to be painted. I have no background, no in-heart history, but it was just one of those things that I knew I could do, which I could never do again, but I knew I could do it. And I read all 17 books continuously in 1.5 days. No eating, no sleeping, just taking notes. Each volume, this is okay, this is the painting for here, this is the painting for there, this is the photography I need, and we picked this devotee Bhargava, we gave him a ticket, flew him to India, gave him some money, planned out a whole system for him taking photographs and identifying what each photograph was. And the whole thing, the whole art of the whole project was planned out in 1.5 days. So if someone were asking me today, could that happen again? Definitely not. There's no way that could happen again. I don't even know how it happened. Really, I honestly don't know how I read 17 books in 1.5 days. I'm a pretty good reader. I can't read that fast right now. If I sat down with the first canto and wanted to read all 3 volumes carefully, it would take me a week at least, if I wasn't eating or sleeping. I don't know how I could do 17 books in a day. So this was the kind of energy that was coming out of Prabhupada, going into his instruments, his little poor tools and puppets. That was what we were. And just making things happen that are beyond us, superhuman. The artists, once we started going, they would paint 10, 12, 14 hours a day. That's so hard to, who can meditate like that? On a form, on creating a beautiful form of Lord Chaitanya and his devotees. or Lord Chaitanya dreaming of Radha. Endless meditation, uninterrupted, undisturbed, until they would fall asleep right in front of the painting. And I tended to not sleep, so I would look around, is anybody still awake? Oh, there's an artist that's still awake. So I would very quietly go up to the painting of the sleeping artist, take it, bring it to the one that's still awake. Yeah, do this part. Have them do this part till they fell asleep. Bring it back to the easel of the sleeping artist, like they're never going to figure it out. And I thought, yeah, they'll just wake up and think that's where they left off. We were delirious. We're not thinking rationally. So finally, one of the artists snapped. I was sitting in my office. Radha Ballava was on the other side of the desk. It's a small office. This was a very powerful artist. By the way, he became one of the great artists of Disney afterwards. His name is Parikit. If you walk around the temple Parikram, you'll see many paintings done by Parikit Prabhu. Very strong, powerful artist. He was so angry that I was doing this. And he thought I ruined, by this other artist, ruined my painting. And so he comes to the door of my office, just like a acarya, like a bull. His eyes are red. I could see the smoke pouring out of his head and his ears, literally clenching his fists. A full charge from the door of the office to get around the desk to get to me. I'm sure he was going to strangle me, pulverize me, or whatever he was going to do. He couldn't control himself. And I'm just watching this unfold as if I somehow had the ability to take time in real time and make it slow down. So to me, this was like in now slow motion, full charge. This guy is so powerful. And just as he gets to me, something amazing happens. Instead of lunging for my neck, he throws himself down at my feet. He grabs my feet and starts crying, weeping like grown man, weeping like this. So we all started crying. He finally got up. We hugged each other. There was an unspoken understanding, hey, we're just doing this for Prabhupada. We all love the same guru. We didn't have to say a word. We just hugged each other, and he went back to work. These were the kinds of pastimes going on behind closed doors. So last thing I will tell you, about 6 weeks into this marathon, the first 6 or 7 books come from the printer. You know, this thing with the printer is another major part of what had to be organized. For a printer to do 20,000 copies of a hardbound book, 17 different books, all in 2 months, no matter how many presses they have to bump everyone who was ahead of us from every major publishing company in America and suddenly put us at the head of the line, use all their presses for us, buy certain kind of paper, have it trained in. I mean, the coordination. And we had to fly out there to approve the color for the books. We didn't have time for them to send us proofs. We had to fly out to Tennessee every time the books were getting ready to be printed to make sure they did the color right. Anyway, they agreed. This one printer in Tennessee, big printer, Kingsport Press, they knew we were a major print company. We had printed 300,000 Bhagavad Gitas at Dynapon. They wanted the business to come over to them. So they dropped everything. They turned their whole company over to us. Anyway, so 6 weeks into this marathon, the first 6 or 7 books arrived. So Radhaballabha and I go to the airport. It's like 2 a.m. We pick up the books. And we have 3 altars in Los Angeles Temple, just like you have. We have Gauritai, we have Rukmini and Dwarkadish, and we have Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. So on each altar, we put the 6 or 7 new volumes of Chaitanya Charitamrita. There were 4 volumes of the Madhya Lila and 2 of the Ancha Lila. So each altar had these 6 books being offered to Krishna. Nobody knew this. It's not the usual 300 devotees are in the temple room for Mangalarti and the doors open. The devotees just can't believe what they're seeing. The books are here. They're on the altar, they're already printed. Everyone was crying and screaming and making sounds like we never heard. There was all kinds of sounds and chanting and leaping. And everyone who was there will remember and will swear it was the most ecstatic kirtan in their lifetime when they saw it. No words could describe the ecstasy of that kirtan, greeting these volumes of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita into the world for the first time. So there's many more parts to this story, but it's giving you a hint of how from the words of a pure devotee guru comes abilities beyond anything you're born with, anything you possess, and when it passes, you can't even understand how that happened. If someone truly were asking me today, please explain exactly how you organized 17 different books in 2 months, I can't explain it. I would tell you it's impossible. But it wasn't. And we learned, our ISKCON worldwide Hare Krishna movement learned that nothing is impossible for Krishna. And nothing is impossible for Krishna's devotees. This is Krishna's world. These are Krishna's energies. Krishna is the Lord of this world. He's the proprietor of this world. He's the source of everything in this world. And nothing is impossible. And everyone around the whole worldwide ISKCON began to feel the truth of how this movement is going to usher in this golden age of Lord Chaitanya's, like Satyuga, this golden age where the whole world is going to just be chanting and drowning in ecstatic spiritual emotions that will awaken. Yeah, this is this is going to happen. It's not impossible. It is absolutely inevitable and going to happen. So there's one story amongst many of Prabhupada empowering. Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada replied to this.
I'm sorry?
How Srila Prabhupada replied, commented on this entire project afterwards when it was done?
Well, we sent him a telegram that the last of the books went to the printer. And then we sent him another telegram that we're having the last of them go with a devotee to India to present to him for his Vyasa Puja, which was the final day of the 2 months. And that devotee from our Sanskrit department, now Bengali department, who carried the last books, he got there right after. You know, Guru Puja, Vyasa Puja is a half-day fast, and then you have the big festival. So he got there in the evening. He missed the Vyasa Puja by a few hours to deliver the final of the 17 volumes to Srila Prabhupada. So at the press, at the BBT, we had become very addicted. We did not want to stop. We wrote to Srila Prabhupada that, look what you've done to us. We know. Live for printing your books. This is all we want to do, day and night. So please give us more books. We promise this, within a month of any book you give us, it'll be out. We will never stop. And we begged him, please, finish the whole Srimad Bhagavatam and then go on to other books. And we were writing letters to Prabhupada like we were madmen. And he liked that very much. Because in Chaitanya Lila, the nectar of Bhav, of Krishna Bhav, turns you into a madman. It makes your body erupt and get stunned and make sounds and quiver and act in madman-like ways. And that's what Prabhupada had done to us. Turned us all into mad, raving madmen. We could not, having tasted this, we couldn't live without it. So we pledged to him our souls, our life energies for his mission. And the same that we were doing with the production, the book distributors all around the world were making the same pledge to Prabhupada, that as fast as you print them and write them, we'll distribute them. The whole world of ISKCON had become like madmen from this. Every one of those 20,000 books times 17 got distributed that year. Every one of them. And the next year, we decided, okay, let's print 1 million Bhagavad Gitas. Which we did, and which we distributed in 1 year. The whole movement had become surcharged and empowered with this mad desire to flood the world with Prabhupada's mercy, Prabhupada's Vedic literatures. And that current, those waves are being felt around the world to this day. Tomorrow I have to go to Mayapur. I'm going to see hundreds of devotees from Russia, hundreds of devotees from China. This was unthinkable in 1975. China was Mao Zedong. Russia, I don't even know who was in charge of Russia, some crazy person after Khrushchev. And it was unthinkable that you could have hundreds and thousands of devotees coming out of these places. So the waves that were started by Prabhupada are still traveling around the world and being felt everywhere to this day. And you here are on the verge of turning this whole country, if you stick to this, into a God-conscious country again. So, Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for listening to these pastimes. Glories to Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.